Consent given.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Sundance Books and Music live stream. My name is Emily. I'm the assistant manager here. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Robin McLean, whose new book, Pity the Beast, is available at the store now. We have signed copies, so you can get that in the store or through our website. Robin will be joined today by Dion Graham, who narrates the audiobook of Pity the Beast. If you have any questions for Robin during today's live stream, please leave them in the YouTube comments, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the discussion. Robin McLean lives and teaches in the High Plains Desert of Central Nevada at Ike's Canyon Ranch Writers Retreat, which she co-founded. She worked as a lawyer and then a potter in the woods of Alaska before turning to writing. Her story collection, Reptile House, won the 2013 BOA Editions Fiction Prize and was twice a finalist for the Flannery O'Connor Short Story Prize. Her novel, Pity the Beast, was just released yesterday, but is already receiving much acclaim. Dion Graham is an award-winning and critically acclaimed actor and narrator. He has performed on Broadway, off-Broadway, internationally, in films, and in several hit television series, including HBO's The Wire. His performances have been praised as thoughtful and compelling, vivid, and full of life. Welcome, Robin and Dion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. In Santa Fe, New Mexico right now, zooming to you back in Reno, but you guys are my hometown bookstore at 250 miles away, and I love coming into the radiant Sundance Books. And I've talked to Dion about 1,000 times on the phone while he was learning about my Pity the Beast book. And it's really fun to get to talk to you, Dion, because I feel like having to narrate, perform, present someone else's work gives you some kind of unbelievably acute insight into it. So I'm pretty excited to talk to you.
I'm glad to be here too, and we'll see. It's a fantastic piece of work, Robin, and I'm so glad it's out into the world now. Yeah, let's see what we get into. I'm in the beautiful county of Kings, Brooklyn, New York. So a few more miles away.
Mm-hmm. So how do you want to start this, Dion?
Good question, Robin. That's a good question. I guess, let me start by asking you, what was the genesis of this book for you? What spurred you to get started on it? And I guess this is the second question is, and did you end up writing about what you thought you were going to be writing about?
Well, the first part is super easy because up until I wrote Pity the Beast, I was a straight short fiction writer, meaning only short fiction. I didn't think the length of a novel was something that I was well suited for. And so I had written a collection of stories called Reptile House. I was finished with it. And then when you finish a book, you have to start another one, apparently. So the way I started this book is that I had lived in Alaska for a long time. And if you live in Alaska, you have a lot of really fascinating friends. Some of them might be out there right now. And if you are, hello, Alaska, land I love. I have a really close friend who kind of reliably has really crazy stories. And he reported in that a neighbor had a horse that had gotten impregnated by a much larger horse, a Percheron, and was having a difficult labor. The foal had died, and the neighborhood came to assist to try to save the horse. And they went to all kinds of crazy, very Alaskan, very rural American, probably rural anywhere measures of ingenuity and cleverness and commitment to help both the horse and the neighbor. And I was absolutely fascinated by this. And then the story stuck in my mind. And that is the genesis of this book. And I wrote it as a really, really long short story. And then I just thought, okay, I'm done. That's it. It's a short story. Ends at about page 50. And then I needed to do a workshop. I wanted to do a workshop with Karen Shepard, who I'm a huge fan, and she was teaching a novel workshop. And she said, I really want to take her workshop, but I don't have any novel, Karen. And she said, well, do you have anything that you could pretend is a novel? So I said, well, I have this really long story, and I submitted that. And then she told me to keep going. And so that's how this became longer than 50 pages. And really, as you know, Dion, the first 50 pages are, a lot of people refer to that as sort of the opening movement. And it could have stopped there, but I had to figure out how to keep going. And so I spent about 3 years writing a bunch more stories, which will be another collection of stories coming out after this. But after that, I, sort of spent that time over with those short stories. And then I returned and moved to Nevada to try to be in a place where I would be able to finish this book. And that's how it started. I had absolutely no idea what the book was going to be, because I thought it was kind of done already. And so I had to sort of open it back up again. And as you know, a lot of stuff happens after that. So
A lot of stuff does happen. I would say it is now the longest short story ever.
Yes, it's the long. Yeah, for a long time under the title, I had a long short story under the title as a sort of an affiliation with myself as a short fiction writer. And I got rid of that when my editor, the fantastic Jeremy Davies, wrote in a margin note, Robin, I don't understand why you say this is a really, really long short story, because it's obviously a novel. So I took it out, but it was in there for a long time.
Yeah, he was right. He was right, though. He was really right. That's really interesting to hear. Because I guess, I don't know, where you were living in Alaska was kind of the frontier. This has the feel, oftentimes, of the frontier. At the same time, it feels like it could just be like, oh, it's just 6 miles down the road from not frontier. And I was intrigued as I was reading it, as I was working on it, because obviously, I mean, I want you to talk about this more, but it's, obviously we're in the West, and you and I talked about, all the various tropes of the West and archetypes of the West that you were investigating and interrogating, and also maybe debunking a little bit as well. And I was intrigued by also the idea that it's not just the West, but like everything, as always, it's us, country, and looking at these relationships in here. And so I'm fascinated by all of that. I remain fascinated by all of that. And I guess that's not really a question. I guess I want to ask you, talk with us a little bit about, first of all, the relationship that's in the forefront as the book begins. I guess that would be with Dan and Ginny, and the things that you were interested in looking at and asking questions about, maybe.
Okay, so the book starts with this thing going on with this horse. There's an emergency going on with this horse, and the horse belongs to a married couple who are having a lot of problems. They're having a really bad day. The man, Dan, the husband, has discovered that his wife, Ginny, has cheated on him with the neighbor next door. and everybody in town knows about it. That's the 6 miles away from town. This is a small town, probably anywhere on planet Earth. Everyone knows everybody's business. Everybody says they want to come over to see what's going on with that mayor, got to help the mayor, but they really want to find out what's happening with this strife. Like it's kind of good entertainment in a small town. And so I was very interested in the way people deal with infidelity and that kind of thing vis-a-vis women rather than men. So one of the things that happens in the story is an investigation of, well, I mean, in some ways it's a parallel. You got this, I didn't plan it this way. This is how it works when you're writing. You got this horse that was impregnated by this, so there's sex involved, in between these horses, and then there's bad stuff that happens and then you've got this overlying kind of dramatic scene, or it's a marital problem. It's a personal problem between these two people that gets amplified by society or by this little community, which is what happens when you live with other human beings. Or so what happened was the two
talk about morality tale.
Say that again?
I said, talk about a morality tale, the way it plays out.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully. And but so you immediately get sex and sexism and the way communities judge right and wrong, and maybe it's different depending on who you are. And that could be among humans, that could be among the genders, the sexes, that could be among different beings. And I hope that the book explores that in many different ways as it goes along, sort of re-examines how that all works. If that answers your question.
It does. It does. I think the book explores it all over the place quite well. I mean, I'm just thinking about amongst the beasts we're talking about. Let's just talk about the beasts of horses first. The fact that the Percheron, which is a big horse with big genitalia, who impregnated a much smaller horse, but we're led to believe that like it was all good until it came time to give birth, and then it's a problem. That was really interesting because there's all kinds of resonance. I thought between the idea of like pleasure and consequence, and also pleasure and other people's judgments that lead to consequence. And, just in terms of talking about the other beasts, some of the other beasts, humans in this, it's really something else about how it plays out and about how people judge the situation, where, in fact, I don't think anybody does not have a log in their eye that they could set aside before judging anybody else in this book.
Good. That's good. Try for that. Yeah.
It's great. This book is fantastic. It's really cool. I had a great time bringing it to life for you. And I hope that people really enjoy it. One thing I love about it is it opens, and it's like, oh yeah, we're in the West. Oh, it's Western. Then the first movement you're talking about, like right away though, like within the first paragraph, we have, our narrators telling us like, oh yes, way back when, back in a long, long time ago, before humans even roamed the earth, this was this. But today, in this barn, we got Dan, and then immediately he's like, you fucked me over, immediately. So we're right in it right away. But then, as you said, the first movement, which is really great. And as we go along, you're listening, you're like, yeah, the sun, yes, the landscape. Yeah. Wait, say what? What? So.
Well, that was one of the projects of the book for me is, yeah, you have to have certain things in a novel. You have to have people and times, got to go past and setting and all those things. And you can call something a novel if you have these, conflict and resolving conflict. There's certain things you absolutely have to have, but I didn't want the book to be just that. I wanted the book to deal with time and big time, as you know. I wanted Dion to do this project because I wanted the narration, the presentation of this book to be the voice of the universe, and that is what Dion provided, the voice of the universe. I wanted the narration to be much, much, much bigger than the action of the story, and to force, whether the reader wants to or not, to force the reader into a larger frame of thought, because I'm really interested in that. And then as a writer, you have to figure out how to do that kind of thing. But yeah, so that first paragraph of the book hopefully, sets that pathway that hopefully the book follows the whole time, which is what I'm interested in. So, yeah.
I think it's great. It's really interesting. I'm curious. With that sort of cosmic lens, telescoping down and back on these seemingly personal, these personal issues going on, what were you hoping that we would get from that? What were you hoping that listeners would get from that? Or how did you think that would, how were you hoping that would prick us into story? If that makes sense.
I mean, I think I was real interested in the idea of stories as weapons. So one of the things that happens in the beginning of this book is that one of the characters starts a story that becomes kind of a collective story, and then the story becomes a weapon. And
can we just say, you're talking about Ella, right?
Ella starts a story. If my niece Ella is out there watching this in Scotland, I did get permission from her to use her name for this.
We know it's not you, Ella.
No, it's not you,
Ella. But Ella is Jenny's sister.
Yeah.
She's if we can call Jenny one of the protagonists of this book, Ella, and they let's just say they have issues.
They have issues. I mean, this story, I also really like, I'll just say this as an aside, that I like the fact that this book is about sisters and women. There's a lot of powerful women in this book. The women are kind of running things, even though it's a male genre. The men certainly think that they're running things, but I would say they're not. But so anyway, back to the question of I was real interested in narrative. We are narrative beings. Humans are narrative beings. We communicate a lot, or mostly, I'd say very effectively through narrative. But I also think I started thinking these kind of weird, maybe bizarre thoughts for a writer is like, maybe stories aren't very good. Maybe we have lost the utility of stories, where myths or fairy tales have always been there to help us know how to live. And I feel that when I look at the world now, a lot of the time stories are leading us astray, and repetitive stories that are not accurate, whatever that means. And so there's an experiment in narrative.
You mean fake news?
Pardon me? Fake news, all that kind of stuff. And just repeating these echo chambers that we talk about, where you just get the information from where you want the information, and it reinforces the story. So I started thinking, well, maybe stories aren't very good. Maybe they're not efficacious, as Dan would say, anymore. And so experimenting with that, but then I thought, no, I'm not gonna go there, but how do I make a story that is useful to us now? That myths or fairy tales were important to humans, I believe. And stories are central to how we communicate. So can I, as a person trying to make something that's useful to myself first, first thing you write something that's useful to yourself, that brings in information into the story, and you claim the relevance as a writer. You say, I claim the relevance of this, and hold it there as a way of making a story different from other stories, and hopefully making the ideas that come to the author first, or than the reader, is bigger than just what we've had, because I feel worried about how stories function for us now. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. But maybe it was ever thus, I mean, maybe it's not just this time, although we're in a particular time, but maybe it's always that way. People are always telling the stories that well, not everyone, but society's oftentimes telling the stories that it wants to hear, the stories about itself that it wants to hear, wants to believe in, and powers that be in society oftentimes telling the stories that they want people to believe in, sometimes for noble purposes, sometimes for nefarious purposes, or let's just say for maintaining the status quo purposes.
Yes. Or self-serving, and that self-serving can be on the personal level, it can be on the community level, it can be on the global level. But one of the things that I've said this, anyone who asked, which is not that many people, I guess, but I was writing a Western. I thought, this is a Western. There's a bunch of powerful women who take responsibility for their situation, even if arguably, other people are involved, but how do you cope with your own problem? And then I've also think of it as people are talking about the book as an eco-feminist Western. And I think that what that means is that beings and landscapes that have not been given any time, they've been in the Westerns, but they've not been front and center of the Westerns, that they get front and center in this one. And so that's a bit jarring, possibly, but I say that's okay.
Jarring? Is it jarring?
I don't know. I hope a little bit. Hope for somebody.
Or do you think it's jarring? You think it might be jarring for some people that these ladies are central to the story in this Western?
Well, I mean, maybe we've gotten to a point where Ella and Ginny and Granny are normal. If that's normal to be who they are, if that's true, then that's great.
I hadn't thought about that. You might have a good point, but it wasn't so jarring for me.
Good. Hey, that's good.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. No, so, but just to have sort of fun with the genre that has cool things in it, beautiful mountains. I love that the fact that the book takes place entirely outside. I'm very excited about that. I've told other people and they're like, whatever. I love the animals and the story, and the power of the natural world in the story, and sort of which is what I do a lot of the time when I'm living in a place where there's no humans around. There's way more non-human beings around than human beings. And I love to watch how they operate and think, what would it be like if humans operated like that and you didn't impose all this narrative psychology onto our actions? So.
Cool. Interesting. Really interesting. I love this book so much. It's a real journey, and it's a real trip that you take us on. And also, it's just so beautifully written. And when I say beautifully written, I mean, yes, of course, there is incredible lyricism in there, but also it's not resting on that. Also, it's really funny in subtle ways and some not so subtle ways sometimes. And just really a great lens to refract us back at our, and refract the light back to us, to ask us some questions about ourselves too, about where we're coming from. So,
well, Emily, Dion and I talked about this, because this is a and normally I would read, but Dion is the voice of the universe, and he is here. And I thought it would be kind of cool if I got to hear him read a section. I just talked to a woman here in town who loves this point in the book where Ginny has to cross a river. Dion, are you interested in reading that section of where Ginny crosses the river?
I am so interested in reading that section. I can do that. Would you like for me to do that?
Yeah. I'll just say, so Ginny is being chased through the wilderness, or hunted, or searched for, depending on who you are. A lot of this. And
you want to tell them? Do you want to tell them anything at all about why?
Oh,
I don't know if you do. I'm just asking.
Well, no, I don't. I guess I don't. No. She's been left for dead. There's an altercation at a big party. She's been left for dead, but she's not dead. And when they realize that she's not dead, there creates a big problem with her being alive. So she takes off, and
that's enough. That's
her. Okay. And she wants to get away. Okay. And then she has to cross a river with her horse, which is known in the book as the cob. And so now you're going to read. Yeah. She was
left for dead.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's unfortunate when parties end up like that.
But it is.
All right. So anyway, here we go. Afternoon, after a nap. Beyond another canyon, the trail widened, narrowed, banked, dipped, incline unceasing, hooves reaching, knobby knees near overextending the stone ridges where the horses bunched. Dismount was required. He led the horses, knuckles to pelts. He used kind words, tugged only as needed, gently, promised rest with a view, water, early mountain weeds to chew. He held a willow switch. The animals eyed it. Show me how to thread the needle. There's a smarty, a brown trout, a baby eel. He remounted. He loved them. The stupid ball cap squeezed his head. The creeks flowed in seeming sameness. Nothing could stop him. Boot prints with the cob's tracks. But were they his own tracks? Another wrong turn, another unintended double back. He stared down at rare mud as the horses drank. He marveled at their huge bodies, how water slid silent in hydraulic shivers. The sheriff needed the horses back in a week. Peace was coming from the city. Mr. Bowman had held the bridle face to his face with the yellow horse. He was a vampire in iron jeans. Afternoon again. He lost the cob's trail again. Kept going. He would find it. Ferns were confusing. The birds crackled and dissolved into leaves. They thought this rider had some dark plan. They were wrong. He'd lost his way, but was not afraid yet. There were no precise words for these new feelings. Liberty, compassion, adventure, wonder, they were insufficient. Bravery, there was no name for him but John Law, a newcomer, an approximation. The ferns and fungi were new varieties too, explosive, proliferated by mutated spores, parachutes and gliders, hybrids seeking replication as all God's creatures do. He turned back, then back again. Beautiful is easy and did not apply to what he saw and felt. A white spiderweb rolled past. He was happy. They would have no Latin labels. New Jersey did not exist. Mother didn't. He was with the anomalies now, singular and unprecedented finally. After all those years of school, strip malls, pop cans, haircuts. His boots were flat bottom with a heel, since you shouldn't ride Western, Jenny told him, except in flat leather soles. He'd seen her always in the market, in boots, muddy, the heels obscured, yellow onions in a bag swinging from her fist. At nearly every creek, the animal steered to drink. He submitted. She would allow the animals to drink, he told himself. After drinking, the animals revived and resumed their pace and pleasant rhythm. It was right to stop, though he lost time. He looked behind him and saw no one. His body shivered in the heat, and he realized this was fear. Fear of what? They all drank and drank. Could the horses be teasing, getting the better of him? If the yellow horse spoke to the pack horse, he knew who was the butt of the joke. Lost. Is that enough?
Yeah. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Beautiful and a little beautiful, deceptively beautiful, but look a little closer or look underneath and a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
We should tell the folks that that was the section you wanted me to read, right?
That was the deputy. I mean,
It was.
we were talking about the river, but
No, but that was 185. So
oh, no.
anyway, that was the deputy who is not from there. The deputy. It's also another hilarious thing. This guy is from New Jersey. He's from New Jersey, and I kind of, he sounds, he doesn't sound like a character of New Jersey, but he's not from there. He's from New Jersey. So, and he's the deputy, and he's out there. He's maybe running from his own personal demons and looking for newness or fulfillment in a different life, different kind of life. And maybe is a little interested in Jenny, but he's out of his depth. And I don't know, it's kind of almost like he's gonna go on a camping trip, and it turns into much, much more. So, but I can read another section, Robin, if you want. I was like 185, but that's deputy, but I figured you knew what you were asking for, so.
Well, no. I loved hearing that. And that was perfect. That was perfect.
Oh, excellent.
I was wondering if you could describe how you find the voices for some of the characters, like, and maybe by doing that, you could talk about how you discover there's about 7 main characters, depending on how you count. Some of them are ghosts, like Granny's a ghost, sort of a voice. But there's a bunch of cowboys.
She's a very vivacious ghost.
She's extremely, and very, very crotchety, I would say, kind of a crotchety, very extremely opinionated ghost. But there's a bunch of cowboys, and I'm curious how you encountered them, because that way maybe people can learn a little bit about the characters, because you had to embody them.
Sure. Well, I mean, I take all my cues from the book writing. I always read the book. That may sound very basic, but certainly read the book. And I love to read long before I was acting. So just like everyone else out there, the movie begins to play in my mind without me having to do anything. So, which is a great testament to your work, that it's, that's working on me and everyone else like that. So then I just try to channel what I hear, what I understand about what the author's trying to say or looking at, through my creative response. Try to be open to my creative impulse and my response to the book. So it's always a collaboration in this way, from what has been written to what I to what I understand, to my response to what I feel that the author's written, and the people that are in the book. And it's funny because it doesn't, books are different. Books are different and doesn't always spool out in the same way. The way I work, I just try to be in relationship and response to what this work is. And with this one of the things that I found just really intriguing, everybody out there, you've heard us talk about this a little bit, was, so this appears to be, and I'm not saying it's not, but it appears to be a book of the West, which is why, as I was reading it, I don't know what I was hearing, but I kept on hearing. I just kept on hearing him. I kept on hearing this person as our narrator, this being as our narrator. And the thing about it, and as I got deeper and deeper into reading this book, and it became apparent to me that she wasn't writing just a pain, a love letter, just a love letter to the American West. And she wasn't just, trying to, glorify the John Wayne-ness of it all, but in fact, maybe wanting to interrogate and question some things that we think about it. So it made me, I thought this was a perfect way in, because seemingly we're just out on the high plains, and everything is all that. But when you find out our narrative, because I don't want to over talk this too much, because I don't want to burn expectations. But it's so funny because, when we have this person talking, immediately all kinds of assumptions people make about who is this person, who is this person. But just as a reminder, and I am in his guise, as a reminder, just because somebody talks like this, that doesn't mean that they don't know a whole lot of $64 words, and not just that, but what they mean, and not just that, but what the essence of them is in terms of telling the story. So it can lure you in like this, and then eviscerate you if you need to be eviscerated, just to wake you up. And I saw all these things are going on with him. Then, of course, immediately the first person we see is an aggrieved husband who just in the listening to it and the reading of the book, just immediately, I didn't realize until I started doing it. I was like, oh yes, he is aggrieved. He's got legitimate grievance. And he sounds just a bit petulant. He's just like, sounds like a big old boy, that, is just, that, somebody really, really done him wrong. I'm not saying she didn't, if your point of view is that, and she had an infidelity and end of story. But I think, I don't know, but I'm going to say all the grown-ups in the room might know that, like, well, maybe end of story, but even if they break up, it's not necessarily the end of the story. Anybody who's been in, through a little bit of life knows it, like, well, all kinds of things. So Dan, just from the get-go, and also it was fun to play with him. Also, as an idea of a guy that we've seen, but the first line is, you fucked me over. So, and I was also intrigued with this idea, Robin. So it seems like we're miles from anywhere. But what if we're only like 6 miles from civilization? So what seems like the West, particularly at this point in time too, we could also be in an exurb of some town or city in the western part of the United States. It's not necessarily Sagebrush, Nevada. I'm making this up. But like, it's just like, there's a Home Depot not far away. Maybe there's McDonald's just down the road too. I don't, it's so, it was fun to play with, not arbitrarily, but just from what you wrote, what I got from these people, the idea of these sort of icons as well, tropes again, who perhaps do make us think about and inhabit the idea of the West and these people of the West, and hardy, salt of the earth, maybe, folks, at the same time, who maybe suburbanites, like lots of people. I mean, they might not think of themselves as living in a suburb, but if it's just like 6 miles outside of a town that has these things. And this is Robin never clears this up for us. She never says, oh yes, this is not far out of Phoenix or Reno, or you take your pick. She never says that. But I think it's really interesting to consider and look at, particularly because of what happens. I'm talking about now with the chase or search or
Hunt.
Yes, hunt.
Well, I mean, I wanted the book to be now. There are no cell phones in the book because I didn't want the problem of having cell phones, but I wanted it to be a contemporary story because I'm interested in all these things that you're talking about. But the Western storyline is very much a part of American life now, whether or not we live in a suburb and drive a Bronco rather than ride a Bronco. It's the idea of the Western and the assumptions that you're talking about when that narrative voice comes into play. I'm real interested in how it's operating under the surface of pretty much, you could say Americans, but I think it's actually much broader than that. And yeah, so I'm interested in that. But the way you talk about you get into the mind of a book is very exciting for me because I, as you know, I'm not a writer that tells the reader you have to think this. I try to present it, and then the reader needs to say, oh wow, that's, these are the heroes in a Western are supposed to act in a certain way, and these characters do not follow that. And it is the reader's responsibility to realize all of a sudden that they have gone off of the script. And I hope that works, but that's what you do for your job, is to intuit, understand the I think it's Nabokov said, like, the subliminal kind of coordinates. That's what Jim Shepard, one of my great mentors, always talks about, the under the surface nerve system of the story. That's what you operate on as a narrator, but that's what I think all readers have to do too. And it's also what I think all humans have to do, is to look at what is actually going on here, look at it, and then actually make an assessment based on what you see rather than what people are telling you to see.
Right.
And I feel like if people did that, which is how you operate as a professional narrator or readers, what I want, our world would work better if they did. So I don't know.
Well, we hope it will work better. We still have to contend with people who are out for their own gain only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. narcissism, which is in style. It's very in style now.
Did it ever go out?
I don't know. I do think it's been more in style now than probably before. People used to go to church and try not to be narcissists, but now it's totally cool to be, and not think about anyone else besides, or just humans, for example. So that's one thing I want to happen in the book, is that people readers, or maybe the characters, or certainly me, have to think outside of the normal narrative box, hopefully. I'm sure I'll be working on this for the rest of my life, but this was definitely an effort that way.
I think it's fantastic. And I think I don't want anybody out there to think like, oh, okay, do I have to search for it? I'm like, no, you just have to just take the ride and keep turning the page, keep listening. It's plain as day. There's no like, oh, are they off script now? I mean, maybe in your listening, like, oh, I don't know if they're off script. I'm like, well, then you might have some things to think about, because it's clear. It's clear. But what's interesting is it doesn't unfold like an action thriller that like, oh, and now they're so off script and all kinds of things are happening, and it's like, things are kind of happening, and sometimes in a kind of quotidian way, and you're like, but so I think it's really great. It's really masterful. I realize there's something we haven't actually talked about at all. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but the arboreal senses parts, or I should say actually, I'm not going to say. I'm going to let you describe. I'm going to let you characterize these sections as you will.
The arboreal, there's these sections. The book has all these sort of motifs that it moves in and out of, and one of them is we spend a lot of time with mules that are opinionated and have things to say about what's going on. And then there's also a section that is repeated that happens in the future, and it's a scientist
way in the future.
Way in the future, when the cedars of this planet have all died, and the humans of the future are trying to bring the cedars back, the way in Yellowstone they're trying to bring wolves back, or but in this book there's a motif that occurs in the future on a ship that's trying to repopulate the cedars, and for me, that was another effort to bust open the narrative walls into time, like a further forward in time. Because you push it forward in time, that means you can kind of push it backward in time. Just as you were pointing out, the first of the book discusses way back in time, and the cedar census sections are the balance for that, I hope. I love those sections, and this idea of Dion just left, but
I'm still here.
Of we have these moments of regret. If you go to the West and you're going around, and you can see these signs that say there used to be huge buffalo herds here, and now there are no buffalo herds, and we can all say, oh, that's really, really sad. Why our ancestors were really stupid to kill all this buffalo. Or when I lived in Alaska, there were, this fight to keep the Arctic refuge open, not open for oil leasing, and people would have, people would say, oh, well, we really, really need that oil. But think of what we did to the Native Americans. We might feel great regret about how we treated the Native Americans during westward expansion, but let's definitely open that oil and gas drilling in the Arctic refuge right now. And there's a disconnect because we do not think of what we are doing right now, that 200 or 300 or 1,000 years ago, people will look back and say, wow, they were so stupid. And so hopefully the cedar census brings that kind of awareness to us what do we do? How are we operating? Because it's not possible that we are not operating in a way that will be critiqued harshly in the future. So I always try to think, what might that be? And the book explores that, hopefully. Does that answer your question, Dion?
Absolutely. I just want to know if you wanted to talk about it. Yeah, definitely. I also like the fact, I don't want to say too much about this, but I like the fact also, we talked about it a little bit, that they also play themselves out in this story, possibly in a way that is in a kind of dream or a presaging of Dan's and Jenny's is why she's not Jenny, she's Ginny. Jenny is another creature entirely.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting. And I think it really is a great counterpoint to so much that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it comes in via Dan's consciousness, and it would fit if people explore the book. If it's Dan, he's interested in horses, and there's horses in the arboreal senses, and
somewhere inside of him, maybe he's just not just a petulant fuck.
Well, I mean, he had some bad things happen to him, Dion. I mean, come on. And there's a lot of bad stuff going on, and
yes,
he's not having good days. These are not his best days.
These are not his best days. It's not the best life.
No, this is not a high point for Dan, and so he's working on it. So
it's interesting. I find these sections, at least, if I find these sections interesting as a kind of alternative reality for them.
Yeah, well, they were an alternative reality for me, as is what a book is too. You're exploring stuff. For me, writing is exploration. You're trying to figure out something that you don't understand really, and you want to, and you go where you have to go. And Flannery O'Connor, who's a big hero of mine as a short story writer, she would always say that, or she said that you get away with what you can, but you won't be able to get away with very much. So if you want to explore some of these things, you have to find a vehicle for it and try to make it in a way that's palatable or acceptable or receivable by another being, another mind, which is what a book is. It's a meeting of the minds with another person in time and space. And so that's what I was trying to do. Hopefully it works.
You've done all kinds of things. I'm excited for people to get to take this journey and experience this book. And I'm excited. I will not be unhappy at all if people take it through listening to the audio of it. I think it's a great.
I know a lot of people who are getting the book and the audio, Dion. So they're all going to call Emily and get all the signed copies. I drove in Reno to sign them, and then get the Dion version. And I think that's the perfect way. Just saying.
Awesome.
I agree. Yes.
Did anybody, I know we haven't done this, but did anybody have any questions for you?
We have a couple of nice comments. We don't have any questions at the moment. I do have a question. Robin, what has it been like as a writer and as your first time having a novel published? What has it been like experiencing your work coming alive, and especially alive through someone else's voice, through recording the audiobook? How has that made you feel? What's the experience been like?
It's been a really amazing, wonderful experience. And for many reasons. The very first reason is that if you allow somebody as astute and as brilliant as Dion into your work. It's a great honor for one thing. And he's asked me things. He would call me while he was recording it, and he always called at some pretty critical moment. Like, you have this book and it's got critical moments in it. They don't look like that. They all look the same. They're paper but they're places that you might have, as I told Dion, that I might have changed that sentence many times because it had to be perfect. And he'd always call at those to ask me. And so it felt like an amazing kinship to have somebody understand this thing that you made. Unbelievably awesome feeling. Then on a more, ground level, or not ground level, whatever, I'll just say it, is that I am a huge audiobook listener. I used to be a potter, and when I was throwing pots in Alaska, I would have an audiobook on. I got them at the Sutton Public Library. I went through all of their books. I used terracotta clay, and there were always little red fingerprints all over their audiobooks, because this was back in the day of tapes and then DVD, CDs. And so I could never get all the prints off of them. I would try really hard, but I could always tell if I had the book because I had my fingerprints. And I just have received so many books via a voice like his, only he's the only one like his. And but of course, so that's thrilling to me to know that this book will be delivered to some people that way, because some people only listen to audiobooks, especially in rural places where people drive really long distances. A lot of people listen to a lot of books, and they are distributed through libraries, which is a really different way to reach readers. So the whole thing was fantastically exciting for me. And I just think, we are narrative beings, but we're also oral narrative beings. For most of human history, we have received our stories through listening. And I've taught a lot too. And I always read to my students or people in my classes or workshops. And I always tell them that I think that listening is kind of a lost art, and that everybody needs to practice listening more. And some people really don't. Like, I've had young college kids, I start reading, they say, oh, I really, really am not a very good listener. They'll say that to me without them realizing that that's a terrible thing to tell someone. Well, I said, okay, well, then we're going to practice. But I think hearing a story is very different from reading a story. I'm a writer, so I want everyone to read it. And I feel like seeing things on the page and how it looks on the page and seeing those lines is vital. So I want everyone to read it, but to hear it is I mean, I love my book. So I think that receiving it through these different mechanisms, I think is great. So I'm thrilled, the whole thing. And to be able to interact with Dion about how he understood the book has been really interesting too. There are things that I learned about the book from our conversations and that are wonderful, that I know that because of him. So the whole thing, I'm just overjoyed that this I'm happy about the whole thing, no complaints. I just am super happy. So.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we are overjoyed that you were both able to join us today. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here, Robin and Dion. And once again, you can get signed copies here at the store. We can order the audiobook for you. We'd be happy to. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Emily, before you go, can I say one last thing?
Of course.
We've talked about how this book explores, interrogates, even maybe debunks some ideas of the West, the Old West, the so-called Old West in particular. But I also want to say that I also think that one thing that the book also does is, in its own quirky way, it inspires actual respect and reverence for what I'll call whatever the real West
Mhm.
might be, and also just asks us to not get caught up only in tropes about it. That's all. That it might be more than we ever thought. It's not, in other words, not just Marlboro Man territory.
Mhm.
Like, actually, other humans and other beasts lived there long before that idea came into being and popularity. And through that, I feel like what Robin also is asking us to consider is that that's true all over the place.
Mhm.
So anyway, just wanted to add that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good one, Dion. Good one.
Beautifully put. Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you again to both of you, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. And thank you everyone for watching. And we'll see you
Thanks
next
so
time.
much. Thanks, everybody.
Emily.
Thanks,
Thank
Emily.
you. Goodness.
Robin.
Bye.